The crystal glass made a sharp, definitive clink when my sister, Jessica, tapped it with her fork. That sound usually signals a toast, a celebration, or, in my family's case, a power move. The entire dining room went silent. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the heavy, nervous breathing of my father sitting at the head of the table. Jessica stood up, smoothing out her dress, a dress that cost more than my first car, and flashed that smile. You know the one. The smile that says, "I won and you didn't." She looked at my mother, then at my father, and finally, she locked eyes with me. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you're genuinely enjoying this story. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Enjoy watching. Mom and Dad have made a decision, she announced, her voice dripping with faux humility. Since I've been so involved in the strategic vision of Miller Logistics for the last 3 years, and since I'm the one with the MBA, they've decided to sign over the entire company to me. Tonight. Effective immediately. She paused for dramatic effect. My mother clapped her hands together, beaming. My father just stared at his mashed potatoes. And, Jessica continued, her eyes narrowing on me, since Maya has chosen to, well, pursue her little internet projects and distance herself from the family legacy, the assets, the accounts, and the real estate holdings will all be transferred to my name. Maya, you're getting, well, nothing. But we'll always have a place for you at the table if you need a free meal. The air left the room. My aunt gasped. My cousins stopped chewing. They were all waiting for me to cry or scream or storm out. That's the script, isn't it? The jealous younger sister throws a fit. Instead, I reached for my glass. It was filled with cheap sparkling wine that tasted faintly of chemicals. Honestly, a sip of shampoo might have had a better flavor profile, and I took a long, slow drink. I set the glass down. I didn't look at Jessica. I looked at my father, who was now sweating so profusely his collar was turning dark gray. I smiled, a genuine, calm smile. "Dad," I said softly. "Should I tell her now, or do you want to?" To understand why my father looked like he was about to have a cardiac event, you have to understand the psychology of the Miller family. We don't deal in currency. We deal in perception. And for 25 years, I was the bad investment. Growing up, Jessica was the asset. She was the cheerleader, the valedictorian, the one who went to the Ivy League school on my parents' dime. I was the liability. I was quiet, obsessed with numbers, and I spent my weekends on my laptop learning about things my parents called waste of time nonsense, coding, digital leverage, and forensic accounting. While Jessica was out networking at galas, racking up 5-figure credit card bills that the company paid off, I was analyzing the P&L statements that my father carelessly left on his desk. See, that's the thing about people who pretend to be rich. They get sloppy. They assume that just because you're quiet, you're not paying attention. But I was always paying attention. The tension started 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. I had come over to the house to drop off some mail I'd accidentally received. The house was a sprawling Victorian mansion in the suburbs, the kind of house people buy when they want to prove they've made it. But as I walked up the driveway, I noticed something odd. The landscapers weren't there. The grass was overgrown. My dad's Mercedes was in the driveway, but it had a boot on the back tire. A bright yellow, metal clamp of shame. When I walked inside, the energy was frantic. My mom was on the phone, whispering aggressively, and my dad was pacing the living room, holding a stack of documents with red stamps on them. When they saw me, they froze. My dad literally hid the papers behind his back like a toddler caught with a cookie. "Maya," my mom chirped, her voice cracking. "We weren't expecting you." "I just brought the mail," I said, handing over an envelope. It was a certified letter from the IRS. I didn't mention that I knew what the red stripe on the envelope meant. I just handed it to her. "Thanks, sweetie," she said, practically pushing me toward the door. "We're just dealing with some administrative boring stuff. Business is booming, you know. Just growing pains." Growing pains. That's a funny phrase for insolvency. I left, but I didn't go home. I sat in my car down the block and opened my laptop. See, because my little internet projects involve data analysis for fintech companies, I have access to certain public records that are a little harder for the average person to find. I pulled up the filings for Miller Logistics. I scrolled past the revenue charts. Revenue is vanity. Profit is sanity. I went straight to the liabilities. And that's when I saw it. The number was so big, I thought it was a glitch. Miller Logistics didn't just have debt. It had a death sentence. But here is where the story gets twisted. Most parents, when the ship is sinking, try to patch the hole. My parents? They decided to find a new captain to go down with the ship so they could take the last lifeboat. Back at the dinner table, the silence stretched out for what felt like an hour. Jessica was still standing, waiting for her applause, but her smile was faltering. She looked at Dad. "Tell me what?" Jessica snapped, her patience wearing thin. "That you're jealous? That you think it's unfair? Maya, grow up. You never contributed to the business. You don't deserve the equity." Equity. I repeated the word, tasting it. That's an interesting word choice, Jess. Equity implies value minus debt. Do you know what the debt load is on Miller Logistics as of this morning? I know enough, she shot back. I know we grossed $4 million last year. Grossed, I nodded. Gross is cute. But let's talk about the 3 liens against the warehouse. Let's talk about the fact that the company assets you just accepted, the trucks, the equipment, the brand, are collateral for a $7 million loan that was called in by the bank yesterday. Jessica laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. You're lying. Dad, tell her she's crazy. She looked at Dad. He didn't look up. He was gripping his fork so hard his knuckles were white. Dad. Jessica's voice dropped an octave. And I continued, leaning forward. Since you signed the transfer papers effective immediately, did you happen to read Clause 14, Section B? The one about assumption of personal liability? I saw my mother flinch. That was the tell. See, I knew about the transfer before tonight. I knew because my father is lazy. He uses the same lawyer for everything, Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson is a nice old man, but he has a terrible habit of using unsecured email servers. When I saw the draft of the contract 2 days ago, I realized what my parents were doing. They weren't gifting Jessica a legacy. They were gifting her a lawsuit. My parents had spent the last decade draining the company accounts to fund their lifestyle. The mansion, the cars, Jessica's tuition, the vacations to St. Bart's. They had borrowed against the business until there was nothing left but a shell filled with IOUs. Now the creditors were knocking. If they kept the business, they would lose everything, including their personal assets. But if they transferred the business to a new owner who willingly accepted the assets and the liabilities, well, they might just escape with their personal retirement accounts intact while the new owner got crushed by the bankruptcy courts. They were sacrificing their favorite daughter to save their own skins. Dad, Jessica said again, her voice shaking. What is she talking about? What loan? My father finally looked up. His eyes were red. He looked at me with pure hatred, not because I was ruining the dinner, but because I was ruining the con. It's a complicated market, Jessica, he stammered. Maya is exaggerating. We have some leverage, yes, but with your vision, with your MBA, you can turn it around. We believe in you. Turn it around? I interrupted. Dad, the payroll account is empty. I checked it this morning. You haven't paid the drivers in 3 weeks. The only reason they haven't walked off is because you promised them bonuses after the restructuring. The restructuring is Jessica. I looked at my sister. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel annoyance toward her. I felt pity. She was a product of their vanity, just like the leased Mercedes in the driveway. She had spent her whole life chasing their approval, thinking that if she was just perfect enough, she would inherit the kingdom. She didn't realize the kingdom was made of ash. Jessica, I said, my voice calm. Check your email. I sent you a PDF 5 minutes ago. It's the audit report I ran. If you sign those papers, or if you already have, you are personally on the hook for 6 months of back taxes and the bank loan. They will garnish your wages. They will take your condo. You will be bankrupt by Christmas. Jessica scrambled for her phone. Her perfectly manicured fingers tapped furiously. As she read, the color drained from her face until she looked like a ghost. 7 million, she whispered. She looked up at Mom. You told me the debt was manageable. You said it was good debt for expansion. It was. My mom cried out, dropping the act. We expanded. We lived. Look, Jessica, you're young. You can declare bankruptcy and bounce back in 7 years. We're in our 60s. We can't survive that. We did this for the family. For the family? Jessica screamed. She threw her phone onto the table. It smashed into the gravy boat. You were going to let me go to prison for tax fraud? Civil liability isn't prison. Dad shouted back, slamming his hand on the table. Don't be dramatic. We gave you everything. Yale. The apartment. The trips. This is how you pay us back. You take the hit for the team. The room erupted. My aunt was praying loudly in the corner. My cousin was filming it on TikTok under the table. Jessica was sobbing, screaming at my mother that she was a monster. My father was yelling about ungrateful children. And I just sat there. I took another sip of my terrible, shampoo-flavored wine. There's one last detail I haven't mentioned. The nothing that I was getting. 3 years ago, when I started making real money from my internet projects, which is actually a portfolio of automated e-commerce stores and SaaS products, I needed a tax write-off. I looked for distressed real estate. I found a warehouse complex on the edge of town. The owner was desperate to sell. I bought it through an LLC so my name wouldn't appear on the public deed. I gave the tenant a very favorable lease to keep them there. That tenant was Miller Logistics. My parents didn't know I owned the building their company operated out of. They just mailed the rent checks to Apex Holdings LLC every month. Well, they used to mail the checks. They stopped paying rent 6 months ago. I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. I waited for a break in the screaming. Actually, I said, raising my voice just enough to cut through the noise. There is one solution. Everyone stopped. Jessica was mascara-streaked and hyperventilating. Dad looked like he was praying for a meteor to hit the house. I can save the company, I said. You. Mom scoffed, wiping her eyes. You don't have 2 nickels to rub together, Maya. You drive a 2015 Honda. I drive a Honda because I don't like debt, I corrected. And I can save the company because I'm the landlord. The silence this time was heavier than before. It was the silence of reality crashing down. Apex Holdings? Dad whispered. That's you. That's me. And since Miller Logistics is 6 months behind on rent, I have the legal right to evict the business and seize the equipment left inside to cover the arrears. Technically, I already own the trucks. I already own the inventory. The bank can't take them because my lien as the landlord supersedes their unsecured loan on the equipment. I slid the envelope toward Jessica. This is a new contract, I said to her. I will buy the company, the brand, the client list, and the operations for $1. I will assume the operational control. I will negotiate with the bank to restructure the debt because I have the cash flow to service it. But in exchange, Mom and Dad get nothing. No buyout. No retirement package. They retire today with 0 equity. I looked at my parents. You wanted to give the business away? Fine. I'll take it. But I'm taking it on my terms. Jessica looked at the contract, then at our parents. The parents who had just tried to use her as a human shield. Sign it, Jessica hissed at me. Take it. I don't want it. No. Dad stood up. You can't do this. We built this. You can't leave us with nothing. You didn't build it, I said, standing up finally. You milked it, and you were about to feed your favorite daughter to the wolves to hide the evidence. This is the only way Jessica doesn't go bankrupt and the employees keep their jobs. It's over, Dad. I looked at Jessica. Do you want to drive the Honda or do you want to drive the company into a wall? Jessica grabbed the pen from the table. She didn't sign the transfer from Mom and Dad. She pushed the papers back to them. I'm declining the gift, she said coldly. Maya, if you want to buy the wreckage from them, go ahead. But I'm done. Jessica grabbed her purse and walked out the front door. The slam echoed through the house. My parents sat there, small and defeated, surrounded by cooling turkey and congealed gravy. They realized that their quiet failure of a daughter was the only person in the room with the power to keep them out of court. I picked up the bottle of cheap sparkling wine. I poured the rest of it into my glass. So, I said, looking at the contract I had drafted. Let's talk about my salary as the new CEO. I'm thinking we start with the amount you spent on Jessica's wedding. Happy Thanksgiving.